Now, okay, so good morning, guys. It's Monday, May 18th. This is biology class, period 4. Sorry I couldn't attend on Friday, but thank you, those of you that replied. And hopefully you saw my update that I posted today. And it is this, that I pushed everything back, obviously, because I missed. So that's not your fault. So whatever I had, whatever due dates I had originally, I'm just pushing everything back. So I had posted that there was a discussion board due last week, but we didn't get a chance to finish the notes that you even need to do the discussion board. So don't worry about the discussion board yet. But again, you don't have to go in this order anyway. Some of you emailed me about doing the quiz, and I said, yeah, that's fine. So um, if you want to do the quiz, again, you don't need my permission. Just let me know, and I'll turn on the quiz for you. But if we look at my calendar, this is the change that I made, right? Because I missed on Friday. So I had put now that the discussion board will be due today, because today I want to just finish up the last bit of notes you need to do the discussion board. And then on Wednesday, I'm going to ask that you read this article that's going to be introduced. Well, the content for the article is going to be introduced on Wednesday, and that is what we call the Hardy-Weinberg principle. And that's going to be chapter 11, which I'm going to start on Wednesday, if all goes well, because I know now that our Zooms are shorter, I hope that I can get through it. But my plan is that we'll get to chapter 11 and this article by Wednesday. If it's Friday, then it's Friday. Okay, so please don't stress, because I'm not stressing. And then again, tentatively, I've posted that the quiz will be for this Friday as well. But again, if you want to do it now, just let me know and I'll turn it on for you. So any questions about the last 3 assignments, or actually the last 4, because I forgot we're also doing this natural selection thing. So any questions about these assignments? Felipe, Alexa, Daisy, Denise, Vivian, Vanessa, any questions about those assignments, guys? We've read them before, but does anyone need me to cover them again?
I'm good.
You guys good? Okay. So like I said, I will take questions individually. If you don't want to ask it here, you can always just message me, or you can reach out to me and we can just do a private Zoom, and I can, help you with whatever you need, especially the natural selection thing. Hopefully you guys saw my update last week, where I said that I changed something on the data sheet. I asked that you only do 3 trials instead of 5. I think that makes a little more sense. That way you have 1 trial per utensil. I don't even know why I put 5. So we're going to just do the 3 trials. So if you weren't here for the day when I talked about the natural selection simulation, please watch. This is the YouTube video you want to watch. But if you have questions about it, I'll take it now. So does anyone, I'm just going to start on my calendar. Does anyone have questions about this natural selection simulation, which I have due for next week? So
No.
we're all good? Jaime, you good? Well, let me just check in with you guys. So what utensils are you going to use for this, Felipe? What utensils are you going to use, and what's your prey going to be?
Well, it depends on sure, but you can use spoons, different items like that to make the
And
diagram. You can have like basically anything that could simplify like what you're trying to show. So
but
this could be
what are you going to use, Felipe? I just want to check in to make sure that you guys know what to do. So what are your prey items going to be?
probably just make something out of like either I'm gonna give up and just use forks, or I can just make things out of paper.
Okay.
Like
But what are your, because remember the assignment was you need 3 predators and 3 prey. So what are your prey going to be?
my prey?
Mm-hmm.
So my prey could be, all right, I'll do rabbit. We use any, right?
No. Remember, this is a simulation, so you don't need to like have an actual rabbit. Like, if you didn't see my
But
video, guys, I use beans, I use little cotton balls. So I'm asking like what supplies you're going to use, Felipe. Not what are they going to represent.
oh, okay. Well, then prey could be like, I would say, well, we'll have like well, okay. So if I go through the spoon route, we're gonna have the predators are gonna be obviously like the bigger ones. And I can use like either like smaller utensils or like let's say bottle caps. We can use
Bottle
like bottle
caps.
caps for
Okay.
for prey.
Okay. Okay. What about you, Jaime? What do you have in mind? What are you going to use for this simulation? Just checking in.
Um, I think a spoon.
Okay.
Um, I'm trying to decide what to use for the third one.
Okay. How about Denise? Have you thought about what you're going to use for your simulation?
For the praisings, I was thinking of like the styrofoam little balls I had.
Okay.
Um, I don't know. I'm still thinking what else to have.
Okay. Okay. And again, this is not due this week. I just wanted to make sure that you guys had a chance to look at the instructions. But please, 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 if you need to watch the video on the what was this, the 13th, where I discussed it. And if you click on the assignment itself, guys, I provided you a video of me, like, showing you what it would look like. Okay, so please make sure you click on the assignment, click on my video that I made, and the data sheet has been updated. Like I said, rather than doing 5 trials, I changed it to just 3 because I made more sense. So that's that summative assessment. The other assignment obviously is the quiz, which again, that's pretty self-explanatory. You can take it whenever you want, but I had put this Friday. Okay. Like I said, this Wednesday we'll get to chapter 11 and this article. But today what I want to do is talk about the material you need to do the discussion board. So I think it was last Monday, we read the discussion board together. And I believe it was Felipe, right? You read us the instructions, Felipe, for this letter to the editor?
Yeah.
Actually, I think a few of you read it for me. I know Thanos read it. You read part of it. Okay, so anyway, that assignment is pretty self-explanatory. You're going to use these words in my word bank to do a response letter to an editor discussing evolution, right? So in order for you to use these words, we need to talk about the words. And a lot of these words we have talked about, like evolution, natural selection, variation, but some of them we haven't. So what I want to do now is just finish up those words with you. So let's go ahead and look at my chapter 10 notes. Can you guys see my notes screen here, guys?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
So, cool. Thank you, guys. So, before I get to those words, let me just take a step back. Okay, so before we knew what natural selection was, there was obviously a lot of work that was done by other scientists, like I've been talking about. And these words in red that I believe, I know we read this. I think we read this last Wednesday. This didn't just, come out of thin air. Darwin didn't just make these terms up. These are concepts that have been studied by people for a very, very long time. And so what I want to do, this is where I'm going to end, but before we get there, I wanted to just give you some more background. So last week I gave you guys all these names like Lamar, Cuvier, Lyell, et cetera, et cetera. And again, those old dudes, I said, don't worry about them in particular. I just wanted to focus on like concepts they covered, right? So like Lyell, this is his major concept, which I discussed in my video last week. But now I want to give you some other people and what they contributed to. But let's start with Darwin. So if you're not familiar with the story, in 1831, Darwin set sail on an expedition to South America, and he was contracted as a naturalist. A naturalist is what biologists used to be called. Biology is a newer science, so back then, if you wanted to study animals and plants, rather than calling you like a zoologist or a botanist, they would just call you a naturalist. So Darwin was a naturalist, and he sailed on the HMS, or Her Majesty's ship, the Beagle, on an expedition to South America, because again, back then that was kind of like, the New World. And so they wanted to know about the animal and plant life. So on this expedition, he noticed something curious. He noticed that the animals in South America resembled animals in the neighboring Galapagos Islands, but they had some variations. They looked different, even though they were the same. They looked different, or if they were different, some of them kind of look the same. So that made Darwin ask himself, well, how did they evolve this way? Like, what's really going on here? And that's an important question to ask because, again, in the 1800s, no one really had a firm understanding of what evolution or even genetics was. I mean, this is the time when Gregor Mendel was also publishing his work on how traits are passed on and how inheritance works. So no one really had a firm understanding of any of this evolution, genetics, change, nothing, right? So this was a good question to ask, like, how is this happening? And so on his voyage, he made a couple of observations, which now we refer to as biodiversity. And so these three things I'm going to show you are kind of one of the clues that gave Darwin his idea on natural selection, which I'm going to get to. So let's go ahead and look at these three together. And I'm going to show you three pictures to show you what these concepts refer to, right? So the first one, can you read us, please? How about Cynthia? Can you read us number 1? And I'm going to explain what this means. Can you read us this, Cynthia?
Sure. Species vary locally. Similar animal species occupy different ecological habitats and look different. Variation because of adaptation.
Yeah, because of adaptation. So what I mean by that, Cynthia, and actually this is not fully covered in the book, so that's why I added these things in parentheses, because I thought the book could have done a better job. So I'm going to add those terms for you, and I'm going to show you this picture to kind of show you what I mean. So in his voyage, he noticed that the finches, of which we call them the Darwin finches, but they're different species of finches, and they're actually all finches, believe it or not. So you'll notice that some of these finches, and I'm going to circle some terms here for you, like the warbler finch, okay, looks very, very different than the ground finch, right? So can you tell me, please, how about Vanessa, what's different, first of all, between the warbler finch and the large ground finch that I just circled? Can you just tell me some of your observations, Vanessa?
Okay, so I've noticed that the finch on the bottom has like a lot of like overall like is more big than the finch on the right.
Okay.
Like the beak size is a lot like wider and like takes more of like the face surface.
Okay.
The eye is, well, it seems like it's also bigger, and then like the overall head shape is larger
Mm-hmm.
than the other finch.
Okay. And so what's different then? So what differences do you notice then? How about Alexa? Just to piggyback on what Vanessa said. So Vanessa gave us some good descriptions of the large ground finch. How would you say that's different to the warbler finch, Alexa, and why? Just using just regular inquiry, let's just brainstorm. Why do you think the warbler finch is so different than what
I
Vanessa
think they're different because due to the what they eat,
described?
how they get it. Because I think it says here that the ground finch eats seeds, so they need like a large beak for that to like crush the seeds.
Good, good. And what about the warbler finch then?
The finch like mainly eats insects, as it says, so you need like a sharp beak also to kill the insect.
Okay, good. And good. And what else would a sharp, long beak like that be used for, do you think, Alexa? Where do insects tend to live?
on wood, like
Yeah, so a lot of them, like, they hide
trees.
exactly. They tend to hide in trees, right? If you've never pulled open a bark of an old tree, like there's always beetles and grubs and ants and termites and everything, right? So very good. So what Vanessa and Alexa described is physically how these birds are different. And obviously there's a lot of birds, but I just picked those two. They're very different due to their environment, and like Cynthia told us, and I'm going to delete my drawings here. Like Cynthia told us, if you go back into the slide, they look different, or they vary because of the different ecological habitats. So when we get to ecology next week, we're going to talk about what a habitat is, but let's just say that a habitat is essentially kind of where it lives, right? And these birds have adapted to their diet based on where they live. So if a ground finch has this beak, like Vanessa said, it's probably due to the fact that yes, it eats seeds, but also maybe because the environment it's in has a lot of seeds. Like that's the main food source, right? And the warbler finch, like Alexa described, has this type of beak because of its environment as well, which we're going to look at when we get to ecology. So very good. That's what I mean by species vary locally. Does that make sense, guys? How the environment can make a, in this case, a bird look different. So those species, they vary based on their locality. Does that make sense? They vary based on their locality. Does that make sense for number one? Meaning the environment makes them look different.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Can you read us number 2 then? How about Thanos? Thanos, do you have a mic? Okay, maybe stepped away. How about Daisy? Can you read us number 2?
Species vary globally. Different animal species inhabit separate but ecologically similar habitats and look the same because of adaptation.
Yeah, because of adaptation. So this is different. Okay, so this is saying these are not the same species. These are different, but because of where they live, right? They have similar habitats. They look the same. And a perfect example of that is this, right? This is how I began the module last week, guys. Where did we say ostriches are from? Does anyone remember? Where did we say ostriches were from?
Ostriches?
Are
What
they
was
from
the
Say it
difference?
again.
Say it again. I heard something.
Australia?
Not Australia. Good guess. That's the emu.
South America?
That's the rhea.
Damn it.
New Zealand.
Yeah, I was thinking that too.
They're from Africa.
Oh, damn.
But it's okay. It's okay. You name different continents, okay? And that's the point. That's like Daisy said. These are not the same species. Yes, they look similar, right? They look like giant birds with long necks and they can't fly. But like we began this module, it's because of their environment, right? What type of environment or habitat did we say these birds live on, guys? We talked about this. Where do they live again? What type of habitat? Don't worry if you don't know the exact names of these habitats. We're going to get into that next week. But generally, what types of habitat, just based on the picture, do they live in?
Like
Plain.
grasslands.
Like
Same
plains, grasslands. Good, Cynthia. Good, Felipe. Good. So that's what Daisy meant, right? These are not the same species, but the environment they live in shapes them to look the same. That's what we mean by species vary globally. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. The last one then is called species vary over time. Can you read us this one, please? How about Jaime? Jaime might have stepped away. Can you read us this one, please? How about Denise?
Species vary over time. Fossils of extinct animals similar to living species in different areas.
Good. Oh, and I just noticed. Good thing I wore my Jurassic Park shirt. What I mean by that is because Darwin, when he was going to South America, he was not just sending back like living animal species, but he found a lot of fossils which people don't know about. You guys probably are aware of the Mesosaurus. The Mesosaurus is it's not technically a dinosaur, but it is equivalent to like sort of like a pre-whale type of animal. And maybe you guys have seen a globe and noticed that South America and Africa look like they might have fit at one point. Well, geologists have now discovered that is because they did. And part of the reason that we know that plate tectonic movements have been happening for millions and billions of years it was partially due to fossil evidence like the kind that Darwin discovered. And he found that fossils that were found on South America were also found in Africa, which helped us to piece the pieces together, which is that the continents have drifted away. So what he noticed is that species varied over time. So again, these three concepts weren't really covered in the book so well, so that's why I added them as three separate pieces. But this is what I referred to as Darwin's observations in my notes. Okay, so natural selection. So what is it? Well, we already read what natural selection was, but now I just wanted to highlight 4 people in particular that helped Darwin to understand it. So Lyell, we already talked about him. Lamarck, we already talked about. So I don't need to talk about those guys again. But Malthus, I have not talked about. Malthus actually was an economist, and economists study the economy, right? They study trends in resources, right? So if the price of something goes up, like obviously right now, if you have stock in toilet paper or soap, you're probably making buku bucks, right? Because it's we have shortages of those things. So economists study basically trends in the economy and help to predict future prices of things. So anyway, what Malthus was studying in particular was population size. And can you read us this slide, please? How about Felipe? Can you read us these 3 things? And I'm going to help you understand what Malthus was trying to say.
Alright. So Thomas Malthus discussed population growth. If left unchecked, population sizes could grow exponentially, while resources, food, water, and land remain stable. Leads to competition of resources, and some would survive more than others. Survival of the fittest.
Yeah, so you've probably all heard this term. This is probably one of the terms that's most associated with this whole concept of natural selection is survival of the fittest. This is not something that Malthus coined, but it was something that, kind of helps us to know what he's talking about. And essentially all he's saying is that the more people or animals or plants there are, and resources are limited, which they are obviously limited for all, right? Food, water, especially right now, necessities like toilet paper, towels, soap, those resources are becoming limited. And so what he was saying is if population sizes are left unchecked, meaning we're not limiting population growth, but we have limited resources, then you're going to have competition, right? You guys probably all remember, lunch lines in middle school, right? Like if there's one pizza ordered in my class and there's, there's like 28 of us, obviously there's going to be competition for that pizza. So this concept is not difficult to understand, this whole survival of the fittest concept, but this concept, along with what Lamarck told us and Lyell told us, helped Darwin to put this natural selection idea together. The last concept, which we've kind of already talked about, but I want to shed some more light on it, is that of artificial selection. So can you read us this, please? How about Daisy? Can you read us artificial selection? And then I'm going to put all the pieces together to help us understand natural selection.
Artificial selection is the process in which humans breed animals and plants for certain favorable traits. Gave Darwin the idea that a natural process of selection and competition amongst varying traits in nature could also bring about biological change or evolution.
Thank you. And so we all know what artificial selection is because we've been breeding plants and animals for 10,000 years at least. That's how we have dogs, right? That's how we have all the variations of foods and plants and animals. And as we know it is because of evolution that is controlled by humans, which we call artificial selection. So those puzzle pieces help Darwin to basically, come up with these 5 points. And we read these 5 points last week, so I won't ask you to read them again, but just look at the screen with me and I'll just kind of sum up everything using this picture, right? And I believe it was Cynthia, you read us this cartoon last week. And so using this cartoon and these 5 bullet points, this is what Darwin said, essentially, is that there are differences, which we call variation, that exist within all species, right? And it's evident, right? If you look at me, I look different than Daisy. Daisy looks different than Felipe. Felipe looks different than Cynthia, et cetera, right? So there's variation amongst all of us. And some variations are more favorable, right? And that's what we call an adaptation. And in this picture, Cynthia, do you remember what the adaptation was in this little cartoon? What's the adaptation?
He has a saw in his hand.
The chainsaw in his hand, right? And if there's variation and some have adaptations, but remember, there's always going to be overproduction of us, right? If you look at a population of humans, right, our population growth has skyrocketed in the 19th century. We're in the 7 billion, and very soon in your generation will be in the 8 billion. So we keep growing. So there is overproduction that's happening, and that overproduction leads to competition. Well, if there's this variation and some of us are better adapted, given that there's too many of us, fitness refers to which one of us will survive and be able to pass on those traits. And what would the fitness in this picture be then, guys? What would the fitness be?
Chainsaw.
But what is the chainsaw allowing the beaver to do?
Be able to cut wood faster.
Yeah, and because the wood in this case, this example obviously is a made up cartoon, but the fitness that this beaver has is that it's able to gather resources that it needs to survive. So that would be the fitness. The last point, can you read this, Jaime, this last one? Then I'm gonna pause right here.
Yes. Favorable traits become more common in the population. Unfavorable traits become less common. Over time, the population will change, also known as evolve into a new species.
Exactly. Thank you, Jaime. So essentially what that's saying is that over time, if this were a real scenario, this beaver with the chainsaw hand being more fit due to its natural variation would outcompete the regular beavers, and over time, beavers would all look like chainsaw hand beavers. Does that make sense, guys? I don't think it's too complicated, but just give me thumbs up if you get it. If I don't see thumbs up, then I'll explain it differently. Thumbs up if you get it, and if not, I'll explain it differently. Okay, so I'm just waiting for Thanos. Thanos, for my last one. Thanos, are you there? I'm assuming he just stepped away. So anyway, everyone gave me thumbs up but Thanos, so I'm assuming that makes sense to you guys. But this is it. That's what natural selection is. Okay, so that's one of the big topics for the discussion board. I use words like variation, adaptation, evolve, et cetera, et cetera. Now let's talk about the last couple of words you need to talk about. So now that we know what evolution and natural selection are, and they're not the same thing, right? We went over this last time. Natural selection is the how, meaning this is one of the ways that evolution occurs. And evolution is the what. It's the thing that's occurring, okay? So how do we know it's occurring? Where's the proof? Well, we have 5 pieces of evidence that we talk about in evolution and in biology. And I'm going to, not going to cover all of these because you can kind of read these on your own. I just wanted to first just address any questions you have so far, because the video is going to end soon. We only get 40 minutes, like I said at the beginning, guys. So what questions do you guys have about natural selection so far? I'll take questions first.
Well, this is really into like the Malthism, because there's also neomorphism, which is like the opposite thing to his theory of population growth. So would that go into effect of any like evolution thing, like that your topic about it?
Neomorphism, what is that exactly?
It's the thought. Well, I don't remember completely, but if someone could jump in, it's the thought like where we're advancing society. So when it's the theory is that when population grows as high to so high, his theory is right. It's like the population grows and there won't be enough resources or food to distribute to the people. Under neomorphism is the thought that since our society's basing is growing, we're able to provide this resources to the same amount of people for like food.
Oh yeah. So okay, now I get you now. So Malthus, like I said, this concept of competition was one of the influences of natural selection in terms of how evolution occurs, but obviously it's not the only thing. And you're absolutely right. I mean, now because of technology and culture, Felipe, of course we can now provide enough resources for all. But I'm saying back in the 1800s, when this concept was laid down, that idea of competition was what influenced this natural selection concept. But of course, you're right. Now,
Okay, I get it.
now
Yeah.
we know, and now we have phones, computers, warehouses, factories, the LA harbor that brings us unlimited supplies, right? But again, when we get to ecology, we're going to talk about overpopulation, deforestation, extinction of species, deforestation. There's so many concepts. So yes, now we know that Malthus's idea can technically be called irrelevant because we have now basically taken over this planet. And morally, what that means, right, that's for a whole other class, because yes, we can keep exploiting this planet, of course we can, right? But Malthus's idea was just foundational in the sense that it helped Darwin and all biologists to know that you can see this in nature, that there's always competition.
Okay, I get it.
That's
Yeah,
what
all
I
right,
meant.
my bad.
Okay? But
All
great
right, yeah, I get it.
question, and I think that's more for like a government class or a social studies class. I get what you're saying, but in terms of biology, it's not really relevant. But I get you, Felipe. Thank you for the
All
great.
right, yeah, my mistake. All right.
No worries. Okay, so these are going to be the last notes. Then is the evidence of evolution notes, and let me just start with the one that I said I wanted to talk to you about, and that is going to be comparative anatomy, because I want to show you some pictures now. Okay, so I had told you guys that I was going to show you guys some pictures of human tails. Remember that? Let's look at them.
Yes.
So let's go ahead and look at one of my favorites. And in anatomy, when you guys take anatomy your junior or senior year, you're going to learn about basically every single organ system in your body and all the major organs that make up those systems, right? But when we're studying evolution, we look at three general structures that we refer to as homologous structures, analogous structures, and vestigial structures. And we look at these types of structures to compare between species so we can see how something evolved from one another or not. So can you read us, please, first, what is a homologous structure? Can you read us this slide? How about Oscar? What's a homologous structure?
The same structure, different function.
Yeah, and when you look at this picture, Oscar, you notice there is these are the what we call the quote unquote arm bones of a bird, a whale, a horse, and a human. But in case you don't know the names of the actual bones, this is called the humerus. Okay, this here is called the radius, the purple one. The orange one is called the ulna. The green ones, these are called the metacarpals. The carpals. These that make up, so the green, the wrist, those are called the carpals. What would be your hand is called the metacarpals, and then your fingers are called phalanges. Don't worry about those terms, that's for your anatomy class, but all I want to tell you, Oscar, is that you see how in the human, horse, whale, and bird, they're all color-coded the same?
Yeah.
Okay, what do you think that means then, Oscar, when you look at the structure of a bird wing as compared to a whale fin? What does the fact that these bones are the same but look different tell you about these animals?
That they have different structures.
But
They
they're not
they
different
have
structures.
they have same structures but different functions.
Meaning what, though, Oscar?
Um,
Like, why are they different functions? How do birds get around?
They fly.
They fly, right? So why do you think a bird's quote unquote arm looks different than a quote unquote whale's arm?
Because a bird can fly and a whale can't. A whale swims.
So what has happened to those structures then, Oscar?
They change.
They changed, right? That's all that evolution is saying, is that structures can change. So we use homologous structures, and homologous, homo means same, right? So these are the same structures, but they've evolved to look differently because they use them differently. So birds fly, whales swim. Do we use our arms to support our weight?
No.
No, right? So if you look at the same bone in a human compared to a horse bone, you see how thick this thing is? Because they have to support the weight of the horse, right? So that's what we refer to as homologous structures. Next is analogous. Can you read us, please, Alexa? What is an analogous structure?
Well, different structure, same function.
Yeah, and so a perfect example of an analogous structure, guys, is wings. So does anyone know what feathers on a bird are made of?
Nothing.
Does anyone know what feathers are made of?
Tissue, bones,
Not bones.
um, skin. No.
No, no. Do you remember go ahead, go ahead. I heard someone say something. Do you remember when we talked about the most important macromolecule in your body, proteins? Bird wings are made of a protein called keratin, which is the same protein that makes up your hair. It's the same protein that makes up your nails. It's the same protein that makes up even their beaks. So this protein, I'm not saying you're a bird, right? But I'm saying everything on this planet that is an animal has proteins in it. So its feathers are made of protein. Butterfly feathers are not the same protein. They are a different protein, which we call chitin. Chitin, Chitin. So this protein is different than this protein. But what do bird wings allow birds to do?
Fly.
And what do butterfly wings allow butterflies to do?
Fly.
Fly, right? So they have the same function, which is flight, but they're made of different things. So does that mean that birds and butterflies are genetically or evolved similarly?
Yes.
Yes.
Not really, not really, because they're not the same thing. So we use analogous structures for something different. So most people would look at like a bird and a bat and they assume, oh, well, they both fly. They have to be related. Are birds and bats related?
No.
No,
Well,
no,
not close. No.
not
Same.
closely. You're right, Vanessa, not closely. But they're not, yeah, they're not directly related. Of course, all living things are genetically related, but I'm saying big picture. Like if you look at just the structure itself, you can't assume animals are related just by looking at an analogous structure. So if you look at a bird wing and a bat wing, that doesn't mean they're related because they have the same structure. We would have to look at their DNA to prove that they're not. So analogous structures are cool and all, but homologous structures like Oscar described for us are much better because they show us how structures are evolving differently. So homologous structures show us how something is related. Analogous structures do not show us how something is related. The last one is called a vestigial structure. Can you read us this one, please? How about Cynthia? Can you read us vestigial structure?
Structure that has lost function.
Okay, so this one is something that we talked about, and I think Cynthia, I had asked you about snake legs. Remember? I asked you if snakes had legs. Remember
Oh,
back because you had the picture of snakes in your little profile pic. Remember I asked you about that? So now let's talk about it. This snake X-ray reveals, and this is a drawing, but this is a real, not X-ray. Sorry, this is a real snake skeleton. So in this illustration here, on a human being, you can see obviously here is the vertebral column, here's the pelvis, here's the tailbone we call the coccyx, and then here is what we call your leg bone or the femur. Well, guess what? A snake has those same exact bones. They have just been evolved to not really be necessary anymore. So its little legs are right here. Now, do snakes use legs to walk? Of course not, because snakes, like we talked about, they live underground. Snakes are reptiles that have kind of lost that function. So those are structures that do not have a purpose anymore, but you can't just get rid of bones, right? So they just change shape. Another really good example of that is a whale pelvis. So if you've never been to the Natural History Museum, there's a great skeleton of a blue whale, the largest animal on this planet. And you can see that it also has a pelvis. It also has those same structures. That's what vestigial structures are. Does that make sense, guys?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me show you now some pictures of human vestigial structures. So I found this on Facebook. I just Googled vestigial tails, and there's a whole Facebook page where they talk about vestigial tails. So yes, like all animals, we do have a quote unquote tailbone. Now we talked about in humans, we don't need that tailbone because we don't walk on all four legs. We don't need tails. What do tails do, guys?
They For balance?
Balance.
They provide balance. And so we don't use them for balance, but we can't just make the bone disappear. So the bone, everyone has it. That's what we call your tailbone. But some people, because of rare mutations, that bone does not go away. It actually develops. And here's a quick little summary if you want to read that, guys, on what vestigial tails are. But they are a mutation where the tail keeps developing throughout your life. And here are some pictures of it. It's if you'll notice, the tails, people can't cut them off all the time. These are real photos. You can't just cut them off because it is connected to part of it is connected to your spinal cord. So they can't like cut them off all the time because sometimes they're connected to really important nerve endings. And so some people, they leave their tails all their lives. Some people get them removed. Some people cannot, unfortunately, get them removed. But if you want to learn more about it, again, you can just go to this Facebook page and learn more about it. But I didn't want to spend all this class time talking about it. But even in humans, we have vestigial structures such as human tails. Okay.
Wait, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Wait, I'm about to tell.
Yeah.
So, like, is it just like a skin just hanging up, or like can they
No.
actually like move it around?
No. Great question, Oscar. So no, it's not just skin, because if it was just skin, just like when people get like little keloids on their ears, or sometimes people get like little fat deposits on their skin, those you can remove off. This is nerve. This is actually connected to the base of the spinal cord, and nerves can travel through there, and blood vessels too. So sometimes people can slightly move them. It's not like a dog wagging tail that they can control like that, but it cannot always be cut off because it is connected to the spinal cord.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, but you'll also notice that it's more common in countries where there isn't like advanced medicine to be able to do the procedure, because they can cut it off sometimes. But sometimes in really bad cases, like like these are very large tails, obviously, it can't be removed. But in like richer countries like the United States and Europe, like they have the technology to be able to remove them. But you'll also notice that it happens in what are referred to as third world countries, because these are mutations. So it happens in areas where there's more radiation exposure, where there's more harmful things that can cause mutations, like we talked about in the DNA section. But good question, Oscar. So again, if you want to learn more about it, you can, there's several medical pages on vestigial tails. They are a real thing. And what it proves is, just like whales not needing their tails anymore, we have lost that function of our tail, but in rare mutations, it pops up, proving that humans can and do have tails. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pause there. But like I said, for the discussion board assignment, which I want you to start today, you're going to use words like fossils, embryos, comparative anatomy, et cetera, and all of these can be found in my notes. Biogeography I already talked about. It's that whole, like we read in class, that some things can look similar, but they're different. Some can look different, but they are similar. That's what biogeography is. Genetics and molecular biology just refers to the fact that all living things have the same DNA. And like Vanessa said, you can show genetically how similar they are by looking at their DNA. If you've never heard of the Human Genome Project, which you'll learn more about in AP Bio classes, this has been a huge effort where they read the entire human genetic sequence, all 30,000 base pairs, and we know exactly what codes for a human being, and what codes for a chimp, and what codes for a duck, and what codes for a blue whale. And so now we can prove to you with evidence what's related to what. So that's why genetics is important for evolution. Comparative anatomy we just talked about. Embryology is just the study of embryos. Embryos are just like early developmental stages of living organisms. So if we look at this picture here, you'll notice that a human, a rabbit, a chicken, a tortoise, and a fish, in their early developmental stages, we all kind of look the same. We all have a tail. right? And some people keep their tails because of mutations. Um, we all have tails. We all have a similar looking head and similar looking little mini structures that will eventually become arms and legs and all that. But you'll notice that throughout your development, those structures change, right? So human tail goes away, but in fish, that tail evolves into this large paddle that it uses for swimming. And why, like Oscar told us, is because based on their environment, they evolved to look a certain way because that's how they need them to look. But all of that is coded by DNA. So embryology is really the study of how you grow and develop in your stages of life, based on your genetics and your environment. So that kind of wraps up all I needed you to know for evolution for this chapter. And that's really all you're going to need to be able to do the discussion board assignment. So any questions about embryos, tails, DNA, or biodiversity? Any questions before we wrap up, guys?
I have a question about
Yes.
this.
Yeah.
Since snakes don't really use their legs, eventually are they gonna disappear from their body? I guess.
Well, they haven't, Cynthia, and snakes have been around for millions of years. So we don't think so. We don't think so. Just like your tail bone will never go away, um, because I mean that's kind of like the basis of physics. You know, like matter can't be created, right? So the bones just change shape, and so let's look at that snake bone again. Hold on, where is it? Where is that snake bone? Okay, so it has just been reshaped, and it does use it, Cynthia. Snakes do use their legs. The only time snakes use these little legs, guys, is during sexual reproduction. Those little legs are actually during. Have you guys ever seen like National Geographic, like courtship rituals of snakes, where they like stand up and they like wrap around each other? Have you guys ever seen that?
No.
No.
So here, like I'll kind of show you with my little wires there. So the way that snakes mate, they don't have like, you know, arms and legs to grab each other, but they try their best. They stand up vertically and then they wrap around each other. But they use those little legs, guys. They use those to support and kind of like hug each other during sexual reproduction. So that's really the only time that they use it, but they do use them, Cynthia. So not really. They're not going to go away because they kind of still use them, sort of. not like we use legs, but they do have some sort of function. Any other questions?
If okay, so like unlike snakes, if like there's actually like no purpose to a bone being there, will it disappear?
Well, the thing is, you know, human beings have been around for a few million years and we haven't seen things just go away. But again, we haven't been on this planet long enough to see all living things, you know, go and come and disappear. So we can't say with certainty, but we haven't, the fossil record hasn't shown things completely disappear. If anything, they just change shape or they get smaller. But when they do, given time, and this is where I'll kind of connect the dots. Given time, if something changes so much, then that makes it a different species, and that's kind of what evolution is. So if anything, Vanessa, if so many changes happen in a species that makes it look so different because it's losing functions of all these structures and now it's like a completely different thing, well, that's what evolution is, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about on on Wednesday with chapter 11 is what happens next. Okay, so that'll be the topic for chapter 11, Vanessa, and I'm going to use your question to get that conversation started. Okay, so great questions today, guys. Any other questions about what you need to do for the discussion board and the whole letter to the editor?
It's just due today, right?
Yeah, I mean, again, I say due today, but if you want to
Yeah.
get it to me later today or early tomorrow, I'm not tripping on that. I'm still grading your guys's last project anyway, so you know, if you want to give it to me today, tomorrow, I'm that's fine. Just get it done. Cool.
All right.
Any other questions, guys? All right, sweet. So we'll go ahead and end there, and then I will see you guys on Wednesday, and we'll start chapter 11. Sound good, guys?
Good.
All right, guys.
All right.
I'll see you Wednesday.
Bye, Mr.
Be safe.
Anything I could say to talk to you?
Of course. Yeah, of course.
Thanks, Mr.
All right.
T.
Later.
All right, bye, guys. So, as soon as everyone exits here, let's do this, Oscar. Let me go ahead and end the class, and then come into a new one. Okay.
All right.
All right. Cool. Bye.
Okay.